During this section of Keep Your Cash, we're going to be focusing on how do you fix issues when it comes to take-in rate. Now, I hope you dove in and watched the other videos and you learned how to find these take-in rate issues, but one thing is to find them, the other was how do I fix them? And so a couple of things that we need to kind of lay out there is some of the definitions we're going to talk through as it comes to take-in rate. Really, there's 4 reasons an application doesn't turn into a policy. And just as a reminder, remember take-in rate is focusing on applications becoming a policy. So let's dive into each one of the reasons why an application may have not turned into a policy. The first one is called closed incomplete. Simply enough is home office didn't get all the things that they needed to be able to make a decision. That might be they needed a paramed, they needed an attending physician statement, they needed whatever it was to be able to make that decision, and we never got the information we needed. So after 120 days, we close that application, mark it as incomplete, send the applicant their money back, and that's when that dreaded chargeback comes to you, right? So we need to be paying attention to closed incompletes. Now let's dive into that second reason why an application might not turn into a policy. The 2 reasons we see probably more than others is improper field underwriting or not following the prompts to submitting an application COD. Now, let's dive in. What does it mean to say improper field underwriting? And this just really means that as an agent, we need to make sure a client understands that they need to answer the medical questions as thoroughly as possible. It really is important that we don't skip or we don't make it seem like these questions aren't important. We have to make sure that there's an onus to say, please answer these questions as thoroughly as possible. The next one is not following the prompt for COD. Now, when we see in an application that something may stop an application from turning into a policy, we may suggest from time to time that submitting an application COD. But you as the business owner have the opportunity to kind of run that. And our challenge to you is this, is that if we're telling you submit it COD, we're really hoping that you look at that and say, hey, I probably need to be submitting this COD. You even have the tools that you need in Virtual Base Shop to see when your downline have been asked to submit it COD. So make sure that your teammates are properly field underwriting and you're submitting CODs when we ask them to. Now, the third reason why an application doesn't turn into a policy is called not taken. Now, what a not taken is that means we actually issued a policy. We gave you what you wanted. Now, it might have been issued differently than you asked for it. It might have had an amendment. It might have had some changes to it, but ultimately you got a policy back when you submitted an application, but for whatever reason, the applicant, the client, doesn't want to take it. The last one is called a withdrawn, and a withdrawn is before we could even make a decision, the applicant told you or told home office that, hey, I don't want this anymore. Please stop everything, send me my money back. I'm done and I want to withdraw my application. So those are those 4 reasons: closed incomplete, declined, not taken, and withdrawn into it. But those are the definitions. But let's go to what's the underlying issue that actually creates these. Now, I'm going to speak of the experience that I had as the 6 years that I did as an agent and learning from RVPs all across the company to seeing here's the issue, but what's the underlying challenge? So the first thing is let's talk about that closed incomplete. What really causes a closed incomplete? Well, what I believe is it's not setting the proper expectations for the client. You know, we're so excited to walk out of the house with that application or get off the Zoom, whatever it might be, is that we're so excited that we got the application that we forgot to set the expectations with the client to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Client, the next step is you're going to need to do what's called a paramedical exam. We're going to have somebody either stop by your house, stop by a medical office and be able to do a blood work, do a height and weight, all those different things. And because we didn't tell the client about this next step, they're confused and then they understand and say, hey, I have no interest in doing a paramed exam. I have no interest in helping get my doctor's information, whatever it might be. And so that closed incomplete typically comes when an agent didn't set those proper expectations. Now let's dive into the second one, which is declined. Now, typically what I find is declined is 2 things. Number 1 is improper field underwriting, or number 2 is that you're not following the prompt to submit COD. So let's dive into improper field underwriting first. One of the first things you have to recognize is as an agent, Our role in the application process is to ask the medical questions word for word, verbatim through that process. What I find is a lot of times, especially maybe with a newer agent that might not be as confident through that process, is they might kind of make it seem like it's not as important. Like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you're pretty healthy, right? So you don't have any of these things, as opposed to saying, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I'm about to ask you a number of medical questions. Whether you tell me the truth or not, the company is going to do their research to make sure we understand all the answers to these questions. And so those two different ways of setting up those underwriting questions could have a dramatic difference on how the client is answering back what their answers are from the medical questions. So I would always challenge you, make sure you're setting up the medical questions to say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, the company is going to find out the answers. The way you're helping me is making sure we're submitting the application properly through it. Now, the second part of it is not submitting it COD when we tell you. We've built the system to truly let you know, hey, when we think there's an application that might not turn into a policy, we're requesting to say, hey, don't submit this with money. We're asking you to submit it cash on delivery, meaning let us underwrite it first, and then if we approve it, you can collect the money with the policy at the time of delivery. Now, what that does is it saves you from having a taken rate issue. Right? It saves you from that hurting against you through that process. So if you're seeing a lot of declines in your business, make sure your team is properly field underwriting and they're utilizing that COD. The next one is not taken. Now, one of two things that I usually see as not taken is either a weak commitment or not delivering the policy. Now, we're going to talk about weak commitment here in a second, so let's talk about not delivering a policy. Now, one of the first things you got to recognize is as you understand how you get paid, you don't get paid to submit an application. No, you get paid when a policy is starting to get paid for from the client. So it's crazy to me to think that you're not setting up the time to go back and sit with your client, answer any questions, make sure they overcome any last minute objections they might have, that delivering the policy is so key and for you to keeping all the cash that you deserve working with that client. Now, the last one is withdrawn. And that one really I usually find is one of two things, either weak commitment or not setting up those proper expectations again. Now, we've already talked about those expectations with the client. Sometimes the client doesn't even let it get too far. They might call and say, hey, nobody told me about a paramed. I'm out. I want to withdraw my application. So be sure you hit those expectations. But the next one is weak commitment. You see, I really want to challenge us as we look at our commitment levels and we talk to our clients that we're sure that they actually want the policy. Too many times we're so excited that maybe turned into a, hey, I think I want the policy. And we need to say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I really would like to have a 2-year commitment from you. And reality of it is that if you have no interest in keeping this policy for at least 2 years, honestly, it's probably not the best choice for you. Not only is it not the best choice for you, it's not the best choice for us as a company or me, the agent. And so I would ask that client to give you a 2-year commitment, to say, hey, if for whatever reason you don't keep this for 2 years, do you give my permission for me to call you and find out what's going on? To really make sure that client truly wants that policy. Now, with those taken rate issues, you really have another opportunity in how you can manage some of the different things. The best tool for you to understand where things are at in the process of an application turning into a policy is Life Manager. Man, do you have to dive in, utilize the tool of Life Manager and all the different things that you have at your disposal to be able to run your business. And so be sure to dive in, understand what's going on with every application, stopping them from closed incompletes, withdrawals, NTO, all those different things that may be stopping you. So the takeaway question here is, are you truly looking at ways that you can fix your taken rate that might be out there?